Welcome to SplitSecond. If you want to buy the best sleeves or other magic-related accessories, head down to Dragon Shield using the affiliate link below.
We are back. It's been a rough road for some of us, but we are here, bringing you some commanders from the new set, Commander Masters. Dio created an Omarthis Ghostfire Initiate, revolving around Ashnod's altar. His love for Dargo doesn't allow him to not try to recast his commander over and over in the same turn. Our new member and editor, Josh, aka the Mormonator, whom you might know from cEDH or MTG Marketplace, is playing Sliver Gravemother. This is a 5-color Thoracle and Core deck, with a spicy combo line that we challenge you to find and leave it in the comments below. Bal brought an Anikthea Hand of Erebos Hulk list, with the basic Hulk stuff, and also a spicy line he has been wanting to pull off for a long time. Elder is already accustomed to going last, but his love for Planeswalkers and Clownstone shenanigans didn't change. Leori Spark Touch Hunter was an easy pick for him, and infinitely cast Dockside and Planeswalkers it's his thing. Diog is going first and he mulligan once, finding quite a strong hand. Rogue's Passage and Ruins of Oran Reef for lands with an early mana crypt allows for an early commander. Transmogrifying Wand is recurring removal, as well as Walking Ballista and Desecrate Reality. Who would have thought a colorless deck can pack so much interaction? Forsaken Monument tops it off with mana production and might be cast as early as turn 3, while everyone else just has 2 lands. Josh kept his first hand with a Command Tower and Scribbland for lands. Deathrite Shaman is a dark as well as hate against Bal's deck. Ledger Shredder for some card filtering and helping filling in DR to in-core stuff. Tainted Pact lacks Thoracle, Grand Abolisher it's great to help him pop off, and Pull from Eternity has a special place in the list. Try to find out. Bal mulligan down to 6 and kept a Mana Confluence and Bloodstained Mire for lands, Mana Creep for Ramp and Witchclaw Talisman to pivot his game plan. Double silence effects with Ranger Captain as well, which can actually find him a combo piece to hand. He sent Crop Rotation to the bottom. Last but not least, Elder mulligan once and found a decent hand, Polluted Delta, Mana Confluence and Inventor Spheres for lands, and the latter can help him get Outstone Curio. Paired with Dockside Extortionist, he's missing a few pieces. Lotus Petal for Ramp and Blasphemous Act to keep the board safe for his Planeswalkers to walk in. Fury Storm is decked with Rawl, as an alternative when con. Ready for the match? Diogo starts the game by playing a tapped Ruins of Oran Reef and casting a Mana Crypt before passing. Josh plays a Command Tower and casts his Deathrite Shaman, ending the turn. Bal plays a Bloodstained Mire and cracks it for his Scribbland. He also casts a Mana Crypt, following it with a top-decked Arcane Signet. With a floating mana, he casts Witchclaw Talisman and passes. Elder plays a Bloodstained Mire and casts a Lotus Petal. He ponders deeply on going for Dockside, but he expects Diogo to cast some more artifacts or even Bal, so he cracks the fetch for a Volcanic Island and casts Ledger Shredder instead, hoping to filter his draws. In his end step, Diogo casts a Warping Whale, choosing to create an Eldrazi Scion token before going to his turn. He untaps and he is safe from the crit roll. He plays Rogue's Passage and then casts Thrun Dynamo, which he then uses alongside the Scion to cast his commander, Omarthis Ghostfire Initiate. Ledger Shredder triggers and Elder discards Blasphemous Act. Omarthis enters play with 2 counters and Diogo passes. Josh draws, plays his Scribbland and mimics Elder with his own Ledger Shredder, ending his turn. Bal taps and takes 3 from the crypt. He plays a Mana Confluence and despite not having anything in the yard, he casts his commander, Anikthea Hand of Erebos. He can still entomb something next turn before she attacks. We're back to Elder's turn. He plays Inventor Sphere and deploys his Dockside Extortionist. Josh probes Elder's hand as he drew into a foe, but knowing Bal's deck, he'd rather wait on that foe trigger. Dockside resolves and creates 6 treasures upon entering play, which Elder cracks to cast Teferi Temple Archmage. Both Shredder triggers and Josh discards a Grand Abolisher, already setting up his ER to eventually encore quote-unquote slivers. Elder then discards the Gemstone Caverns and then Teferi resolves. He upticks them and passes the turn. Diogo taps and now takes 3 from his crypt. He draws and then casts Forsaken Monument. Everyone is afraid about him coming with Basalt Monolith, but he claims he actually forgot to include it in the list. On the other hand though, he slams his Ballista, X equals 2. Monument and both Shredder triggers and Elder keeps ditching lands, while Josh discards Pull from Eternity, since his card quality in hand is increasing. Diogo gains 2 life from the Monument and Ballista enters play, triggering Omarthis, who gains 2 counters. Diogo then attacks the fair with Omarthis and Elder lets it through, as he needs Dockside and wants to keep Shredder to keep digging for Curio. We're on Josh's turn now. After some talk, Bal agrees to let him dash in Ragavan in hopes to find removal for that Ballista that can keep being used to police the board. Bal doesn't block and Diogo keeps his Ballista steady. Ragavan triggers, exiling a Diabolic Intent, which is quite good. On the second main phase, Josh plays an untapped Watery Grave, paying 2 life, and thus casts the Intent, sacrificing the Ragavan. He then gets Ashes of the Fallen to his hand and passes the turn. Bal rolls and takes no damage from the crypt. He ponders on his upkeep, but not only Josh into that counter magic and is tight on mana, so he draws and plays a Phyrexian Tower. He then casts a Ranger Captain of Eos, entering play and triggering. He searches for a Deathrite Shaman to hopefully have Josh in check. He then uses the floating mana to activate Wishclaw Talisman and searches for an Entomb, slowly setting up his plan. He gives the talisman to Elder since he's way behind on mana, and doesn't seem like he can activate it and win. And if he doesn't win, it means he either gives it to the Ballista deck with 12 mana available, or both other decks that just tutor and have way more mana than him. He does cast the Deathrite Shaman, triggering both Shredders. Josh is tight on options, so he discards a Tainted Pact, while Elder discards an Izzet Signet. However, Josh responds with a Mental Misstep, which is not that bad for Bal, considering he has Whirly Tutor, Silence and Entomb at hand. We're back to Elder's turn. He plays a Mana Confluence and fires an Enlightened Tutor. To no one's surprise, he gets a Cloudstone Curio. He then upticks the fairy to get it to his hand. He follows that to none other than Dockside Extortionist, Phantasmal Image. Both Shredder triggers and Josh discards a Tarnished Citadel. Elder discards a Windswept Teeth, but with the Fimage still on the stack, Diogo feels forced to fire his Ballista, picking Dockside once and then twice, so Elder can clone it. It eventually enters play as a copy of Ranger Captain of Eos, which is not that bad either. He searches for a Serra Ascendant and passes the turn. Diogo taps and is once again safe from the crypt. He plays a Monumental Facade and proceeds to combat. He sends his commander at Elder and Ballista at Bal. If you're still wondering why Ballista is still in play without counters, remember the Forsaken Monument provides +2/+2 to his colorless creatures. No one blocks, and Diogo activates Ballista to give it a +1/+1 counter, which in turn gives one counter to Omarthis as well. In his second main phase, he activates Monumental Facade to put an oil counter on Omarthis, because they care about counters of any kind. He's down one Ballista activation, but he has something up his sleeve. Josh draws, plays a Savannah and casts a Mana Crypt. He follows it with Ashes of the Fallen, which trigger both Shredders. Elder discards the Fairy, Hero of Dominaria, and Josh discards his Force of Will. Since he eventually used his misstep, he has no other blue cards at hand. Ashes resolve, and as it enters play, Josh chooses Slivers of course. With almost everything in place, he needs his commander, Sliver Gravemother, which he casts before passing the turn with 2 cards in hand. Bal taps and takes another 3 from the crypt. Ballista is still preventing him from going for any of his lines, so he simply draws and goes to combat, sending 7 damage towards Diogo. On his second main phase, he casts Priest of Fell Rites and passes. Elder draws into removal, but he considers deeply if he should take out Ballista and give way to Josh and Bal. He floats mana and downticks the fairy to untap his 3 lands, so he can now cast Nahiri the Harbinger. He downticks her to exile Ballista, and in response Diogo removes 1 counter to ping Phantasmal Image, which, being a Ranger Captain, Elder activates it to semi-silence his opponents. In response though, Diogo fires his Trick. Desecrate Reality. He targets Josh's Ashes of the Fallen, Bal's Phyrexian Tower and Elder's Teferi. Elder now casts a Serra Ascendant, triggering both Shredders. Josh discards a Survival of the Fittest, and Elder discards Narset Parter of Veils. Diogo taps and takes 3 from his crypt. He draws and jumps to combat, turning Omarthis sideways towards Elder. Either of his creatures can trade with it, and that's what Diogo wants. Elder wants to maintain his 30 life threshold, so he blocks with Shredder. Omarthis dies, triggering to manifest 5 times. Unfortunately to him, he finds 3 lands, Mirror Retriever and Ugin the Ineffable. In the second main phase, he casts Transmogrifying Wand, gaining 2 life from the monument, and then he activates it, targeting Bal's Ranger Captain. Bal doesn't activate it, happy enough with the 2/4 token. Diogo finishes by recasting his commander, Omarthis, triggering the monument and both Shredders. Elder discards a Johnny Vengeant, and Josh discards Kill the Drake. He gains 2 life and passes. Josh untaps and loses the crypt roll. He draws, plays a Tropical Island and casts an Eternal Witness. It enters play and he targets Tainted Pact with the trigger. Everyone's seeing where this is going, as he now uses Deathrite Shaman to help pay for an Eldritch Evolution. Ewit is sacrificed and both Shredders trigger. Elder responds to this trigger with a Mystical Tutor. He searches for a Force of Will to the top. He draws it, discards Fury Storm, but passes priority, since his other card in hand is Cloudstone Curio. Shredder could still force Josh to draw Thoracle, but it was a mere ignoble hierarch. Still, in response to Eldritch Evolution, Bal mentions how this is usually David's fate, as he brings silence to the stack. Josh only has Tainted Pact at hand, so he could go for a Spellseeker into new form and try again next turn, but he'd rather go for Dockside Extortionist so he has some mana to interact with his Tainted Pact. 8 treasures are created and he passes to Bal. He untaps, rolls and takes another 3 damage to the face. He draws and activates Priest of the Fell Rites to try to return Ranger Captain into play again. It enters play, triggers, and Bal responds to its search trigger by cracking it to see what Josh does, and hence search for one of 2 different options. Josh thus casts the Tainted Pact and quite soon finds a karmic response. Silence hits the stack, triggering both Shredders. Josh draws and discards Pact of Negation, and Elder discards his Force of Will. Ball searches for a Visceral Seer and then plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb before passing. He does consider Unearthing Priest to return Ranger Captain again, but there's 57 damage on the board and he would be an easy target to shoot down. We're on Elder's turn. He found a Marsh Flats, which he plays and cracks for a Plateau. He then activates Witchclaw Talisman, which kinda means he has an open path to victory now. He finds Annual Breach and casts it. Everyone pretty much blew their interaction by now, so he exiles a Simian Spirit Guide for red mana to help escape Dockside Extortionist. Both Shredders trigger, but it's basically top card meal for Josh and Elder too. Dockside enters play, and in response to the trigger, Josh cracks all his treasures, but Elder still gets a whopping 9 treasures. Elder's last card in hand is a Cloudstone Curio that he casts, and follows that with his commander, Leori Spark Touch Hunter, entering play and triggering Dockside to be returned to his hand. He can now demonstrate a loop where he casts Dockside and it enters play creating 9 treasures, and he returns any of his creatures to hand, to recast to return Dockside to hand again thanks to Cloudstone Curio. After generating a Google of treasures, he now escapes a Johnny Vengeant, entering play and triggering Cloudstone Curio to bounce Nahiri back to his hand. He downticks a Johnny on one of his opponents and repeats the loop of casting Nahiri to bounce a Johnny back and forth, over and over again, lightning helixing his opponents to death. GG. Thank you for joining us for today's match, everyone. Forsaken Monument allowed Diogo not only to produce a lot of mana as well as to maintain Ballista alive even without counters, and almost everyone wanted to do creature-based combos, so Ballista kept the table in check for that. Ledger Shredder was another MVP, helping Josh and Elder to dig deep into their winning lines, but in the end Dockside and Breach were enough after everyone else blew their interaction. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, TJ Rapp, Ajimo, Drunken House Cat, Pina, Ricardo, Katerina and Zinan, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing or by becoming a patron yourself. If you want to go through other Commander adventures, click one of the videos on the right. If you want to talk with us about our games or other EDH related matters, join us on Discord. Join us again next week for a new set of Commanders and more decisive plays. See you all then.